When it comes to talking distance, amateurs are typically most concerned about how far they hit their fairway woods once the discussion about drivers has been covered. Often used as an alternative option off the tee by many golfers, getting as much distance as possible with fairway woods is therefore key for many players. And when any golfer starts talking about how far they hit their fairway woods, the natural query in their head is often how that distance compares to others. But unlike the longest club in the bag, fairway woods are not just used off the tee, and are also frequently used both for approach shots as well as positional second shots on long par 5s. So in this video we take a look at the stats to analyse how far the various categories of handicapped golfers hit their 3-wood and 5-wood, both off the tee and for approach shots, and also check what the data says about whether hitting your 3-wood off the tee for a bit more accuracy compared to your driver really is a good idea. The topic of distance seems to be a bit of an obsession in the game of golf today, and given it is the second longest club in the bag, the average golfer is therefore often interested to know how far they should hit their 3-wood compared to their peers. Thankfully, in the modern game, there's a bunch of technology which can help us answer distance questions, and this includes Arccos, golf's first AI shot tracking platform, which now boasts 550 million amateur golf shots from across the world in its database. And as a whole, according to Arccos, the average 15 handicap golfer hits a 3-wood a total distance of 178 yards. Scratch players hit a 3-wood 209 yards, while 5 and 10 handicap players average 198 and 187 yards respectively. 20 handicappers hit a 3-wood an average of 169 yards, and 25 handicappers average 168 yards. But as we have already noted, 3-woods are not the same as drivers, and not for the more than obvious reason that they are different clubs. While almost without exception every golfer on the planet hits their driver only off the tee and as far as possible, 3-woods are used for a greater variety of shots. Not only do players of all standards frequently use them off the tee, but they are also often used for positional shots and par 5s as well as for long approach shots. And interestingly, Arccos' analysis of their users' millions of golf shots points to a clear difference between the average distances golfers hit their 3-wood off the tee compared to for approach shots. On average, for example, 11 to 15 handicappers hit their 3-wood a total distance of 186 yards off the tee, which is 16 yards more than the average with their 3-wood approach shots. And this graphic shows all handicap categories average a shorter distance with their 3-wood approach shots versus tee shots, with the biggest gap seen in scratch to 5 handicappers. So in summary, the main conclusion all golfers, whatever their standard, should draw when looking at the data of how far amateurs hit their 3-wood is that they should always assume that they will hit it further off the tee than they will off the fairway or out of the rough for their approach shots. And that is definitely something to bear in mind the next time you line up your next long approach shot and assume you're going to hit the 3-wood the same distance you've just hit it off the tee. When it comes to fairway woods, the most common clubs golfers typically carry is a 5-wood alongside a 3-wood. Indeed, this is also reflected in the pro ranks, where we found that 28% of the top PGA Tour players used a 3-wood and 5-wood combination, which was more than any other when it came to those pros who carried multiple fairway woods. So, having already looked at the longer of these fairway woods, how do the distances amateurs hit a 5-wood compare? In total, average 11 to 15 handicappers hit a 5-wood 168 yards off the tee, but only 159 yards for approach shots. 0 to 5 handicappers, meanwhile, average 175 yards for 5-wood approach shots and 188 yards off the tee. 6 to 10 handicappers also hit 5-wood approach shots 13 yards shorter, while 20 plus handicappers average 137 yards off the tee. This data is again taken from Arccos' analysis of millions of their amateur users' golf shots across the various handicap categories, and while the differences between how far higher handicap amateurs hit their 5-wood and average off the tee compared to approach shots is not as big as it is with their 3-woods, the clear message from this data is again consistent for all amateur players of whatever handicap. And that is, amateurs on average never hit their 5-wood as far for their approach shots as they do when hitting the same club off the tee. Golfers can often talk about how far they hit the ball for hours on end, and particularly when it comes to comparing how far they hit the ball compared to their friends and playing partners. But when it comes to looking at how far golfers hit their own clubs compared to each other, that subject is often not as frequently covered, when it certainly should be, especially given how important it is for every player to know exactly how far they hit the ball with each club. And when it comes to the question of how far your 3-wood goes versus your 5-wood, while the answer is perhaps obvious, it is subtly different for different standards of amateur golfer. As a general rule, amateur golfers hit their 3-woods approximately 20 yards further than their 5-woods off the tee, but only 11.4 yards further when hitting the same clubs for approach shots. The difference between how far a 3-wood goes compared to a 5-wood, however, is greater for low handicap amateurs. And as we can see clearly from this Arcos data, the difference in how far different standards of golfer hit their 3-woods compared to their 5-woods is pretty consistent, whether they are using their fairway wood for tee shots or approach shots. This may not be used to many, but this analysis is clearly backed up when we look at how far golfers hit their 3-woods and 5-woods based on their swing speed. In the last decade in particular, swing speed has become an ever popular metric, and analysis of it has highlighted a direct link between swing speed and how far you hit your clubs. In short, the higher your swing speed, the further you hit your clubs, including your fairway woods, and following on from that, the stats also show that the further you hit your clubs, the lower your scores and handicap will be. So, when we look at these estimates of carry distances of how far golfers with different swing speeds hit their 3-wood and 5-wood, the increasing gap between them as the swing speeds, and therefore the standard of golfer, increase, is as evident as it was when we looked at the distance data broken down by handicap category. Amateur golfers are frequently concerned with how far they hit their fairway woods, and 3-wood in particular, because they often see it as a more accurate alternative off the tee compared to their driver. The great debate of driver versus 3-wood off the tee is indeed an age-old argument, but thanks to Arcos we now also have data to help examine which in reality is the smartest play on average. And the simple conclusion of the stats is that whatever your skill level, the increased accuracy you gain off the tee with your 3-wood is typically not worth the distance you give up. As we can see from this graphic, the average fairway hit percentage for driver is 45.5% compared to 46.4% with hitting 3-wood across all handicap categories. However, that mere 0.9% increase in accuracy comes at a cost of 12 yards worth of distance, which, when you consider strokes gain numbers that show distance is the key to better scores, highlights that losing a whole club worth of distance by hitting 3-wood off the tee is more likely to increase your scores rather than reduce them. Big misses from the middle of the fairway of up to 30 to 40 yards are also not that much different for both clubs. And as we can see from these same graphics, focusing in on scratch and then 20 handicap golfers, this same message that amateurs are sacrificing a lot of yardage for not many more fairways hit when choosing 3-wood over driver off the tee is clear. Every tee shot is of course different, and naturally a shorter tee club is sometimes required to ensure you keep the ball in play and out of major trouble. But be careful if you start thinking of your 3-wood as a reliable replacement for your driver, because the distance you give up as a result is probably not worth it. Thanks for watching. Please like this video if you found it useful, and most importantly, enjoy your golf.